Well, the strikes have brought continued misery to drivers struggling to fill their tanks. Around 1/3 of France's gas stations are facing shortages. And in a controversial move, the government has requisitioned some workers, insisting the situation will improve within the week. But it could actually be worsening, with rail workers now calling for strikes next week. Well, for more on this and the other challenges facing the French president, I'm joined by our foreign and French affairs editor, Philip Turle. Good morning, Philip. Philip, this is just one of a series of problems that Emmanuel Macron is having to face, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and he is having quite a rough autumn so far. Just to give you an example, as far as the fuel strikes are concerned, I was talking to a taxi driver this morning in Paris, and he said he'd spent 3 hours queuing up outside a fuel station yesterday to fill his tank, and he only had half a tank left. So there are a lot of people who are getting incredibly annoyed about what's going on in the country, and they can't fill their cars up. Should the French government intervene to end the strike? 66% of French people are now saying yes. But at the same time, a large number of French people sympathise with the strikers. You'll find that in another opinion poll, 57% of French people said that they understood what the strikers were asking for. That's to say a 10% bonus, because TotalEnergies, the main oil company in France, makes billions in profits, and they think the workers should be able to profit from that more in their salaries every month. Now, there is a general feeling in the government, and certainly amongst Emmanuel Macron's close entourage, that the Prime Minister, Elisabeth Borne, and government ministers haven't really dealt with this problem quickly enough. There have been statements coming out of the government over the past week saying, well, the petrol is available in France, there's gasoline everywhere, all you need to do is just get it to the stations where they can deliver it to the drivers, and there is no real shortage. That's not the message coming from the strikers themselves, who are blocking the refineries so the supplies can't get out there and can't get to the filling stations, and the motorists around the country, many of whom have already said that they're going to cancel their weekend away. We have a holiday season coming up next week, and they just can't get away because they can't fill their cars up. And many people are saying they're going to go out of business because they use their cars on an everyday basis to go to work, and they can't fill them up either. So the pressure is on Emmanuel Macron. He says the strike is going to be over within the next few days, but as you were saying in your introduction, there is another strike on the horizon in France next week on Tuesday the 18th, when rail workers look set to go on strike, and also the French transport system, the RATP. And this is the beginning of what is often called an autumn of discontent. And the left wing in France, the France Unbowed, has said this is the start of a confrontation between workers and the government, because they say with all the height going on, or the high bills they're having to pay for fuel in this country, for heating their homes and for making ends meet every month, they just can't do it, and that's why they want the government to intervene.
And the government's facing a confrontation on several fronts, Philip, because they're also struggling to pass their budget, which is being contested by the opposition.
Yeah, more misery for the government at the moment, and in particular the Prime Minister, Elisabeth Borne. The government is desperately trying to pass its budget. That is due to be passed today. The problem is it won't be voted on in the National Assembly. That's for the simple reason that Emmanuel Macron doesn't have a majority in the National Assembly since the elections earlier this year. He needed 289 seats to obtain a majority. He only has 250 seats with his Ensemble coalition. He had 320 seats before the last presidential elections and legislative elections in this country earlier this year, which means he has to depend on other parties to push his legislation through. None of the other groups in the National Assembly, be it the left-wing coalition, the National Rally of Marine Le Pen, the traditional right, or the left, are willing to back Emmanuel Macron on this. They put loads of amendments on this bill, so it's going to be passed through the Council of Ministers meeting, and then they're going to use what is called the 49-3 legislation, excuse me, which can be used in exceptional circumstances to pass budgets in France if they don't have a veto from other parties. So more misery for the government, because it's seen as pushing legislation through without a vote in the National Assembly.
Yeah, using that measure, never a popular choice here in France. And there's also another embarrassment for Macron, Philip, and that's that two of his ministers are being investigated for illegal goings-on. They've still, though, remained in their posts, despite pledges from the president that the French government should be exemplary.
Well, this is not the first time this has happened since Emmanuel Macron has been president. Back in 2017, he said he was going to be exemplary, and any minister who was put under official investigation would have to stand down from his or her job. That is not the case right now. If you look at the opinion polls for France, Emmanuel Macron is only on 32%. He's lost 4% in the latest polls. Even worse for Elizabeth Borne, the Prime Minister. She's on 29%, down 6%. Two of the ministers, that is Éric Dupond-Moretti and Alexis Kohler. Éric Dupond-Moretti, who is the Justice Minister, and Alexis Kohler, who is the General Secretary of the Élysée. That is Éric Dupond-Moretti, are now under official investigation and risk losing their jobs, but they are getting the backing of Emmanuel Macron, who in the old days would have asked them to resign. That is also being seen by people in France as being something that is away from the pledges of exemplary behaviour by ministers in France, and therefore the president has lost more support over that as well. So lots of problems that Emmanuel Macron has got to sort out, but the main one being how are French people going to fill their cars up, how are they going to get away, and how is the country going to keep running if there's actually no petrol available for anybody?